I'm going to start this video by apologizing to people who watch these videos on their phones. You can't read this. All right? For people on their computers, hopefully you can read it, and if you're watching on your TV, you maybe got a chance. But it's okay, because it's on the board, so I remember it. So going back to when the channel started, and I would forget a lot of stuff, and I'm like, I messed up in that video. So I started using whiteboards for myself so I wouldn't forget. And that's how the whiteboard started. Just so that if I was going to do a video, news of the day kind of thing, that I would have all the information on the board, and then I wouldn't forget stuff. Because the initial videos in this channel were just me sitting on a couch rambling, and there was no board, there was no reference point. So I've got all 31 owners, I think, on here. And I mean, I think because there are some teams that are owned by corporations. So there's a lot of money in the corporation, and then you have one basically head of that entity that's the NHL's official owner. And in some cases, who's listed as the owner may or may not actually be the owner. Looking at you, Colorado. But yeah, so let's go through this in alphabetical order, because again, we're going to hear a lot from owners over the next month about how much money they might lose and how much money they might not. So I want to take a look at who might be losing money right now throughout this 2020 that we've had. And honestly, billionaires have done pretty well. They've done pretty well throughout this. So we'll start with Henry Samueli in Anaheim. He's worth $3.8 billion, according to estimates in 2017. So some of these are not completely up to date in terms of what these guys are worth, which, yeah. And then I started listing their ages, but then I stopped because there was too many other items to list, and I thought the age isn't all that interesting. But 66 years of age, and he's the co-founder of Broadcom. So his company's probably done pretty well, probably hasn't lost a lot of value throughout 2020. Alex Mariello, of course, famously takes over Arizona. He was worth $2 billion in 2018. I'm going to go out on a limb and say he's probably worth more than that now. But he owns resorts. He owns resorts in Vegas. And resorts in Vegas this year have been absolutely drilled by this. Yeah, this isn't a great time for any place that needs tourism. And so my guess is he's probably lost a lot of money. Or at the very least, he's had some issues with that. He also owns TV networks and Fuji Food. So it may all kind of balance out, but I'm going to say straight out that the resorts in Vegas are not making money, and resorts elsewhere likely aren't making money either. Jeremy Jacobs is worth $3.7 billion as of 2019. 80 years of age. We know he's stepping down and letting his kids take over, and he's the Delaware North chairman. So once the kids take over, the idea is that things might soften a bit from the Bruins. But when we hear about how difficult things are going between owners and players, I always picture Jeremy Jacobs kind of sticking his head in the room and yelling at the players and shaking his fist, and Bettman trying to shoo him out of the room so they can get stuff done. And then he comes over to the window and he starts yelling in the window, banging on the door, and then he turns around and tells kids to get off his lawn. That's how I picture Jeremy Jacobs in negotiations with the NHL and the NHL players, because he's always been the hawk. And hawks are really cool, but not in this case. He's always been the one that, I don't want to lose any of my $3.7 billion. So again, it is billionaires versus millionaires. This is why these guys are able to outweigh players. Terry and Tim Pegula are worth reported 4.9 billion years of age. Terry's 69 years of age. They also own the Buffalo Bills. They own the Rochester Americans, the National Lacrosse League Bandits, and JKLM Energy. So oil this year has struggled with values. Oil tanked in March. It just because nobody was going anywhere. So it turns out when nobody's using gas, it's not worth anything. And so there were countries that cut production. There were countries that increased production, and it was overall a mess. So again, for us, probably a pretty good year. For them, maybe a bit of a down year. And again, when you own all these teams and you're not getting anybody into your buildings, you're just not, and the Bills aren't going to be generating the kind of revenues they would be if they could have a full stadium. N. Murray Edwards is listed as the owner for the Calgary Flames, worth $1.5 billion in 2019, and he's a financier and has a lot of oil sands, Alberta sort of oil. He's seen as a big stakeholder, and again, Alberta oil, it's been a tough year for them, so it's highly likely that he's maybe taken a bit of a hit. And I always say a bit because when you get with the billionaires, there's ways around it, and there's probably ways that they can avoid losing everything, kind of thing. Tom Dundon is worth $1.1 billion as of 2015. I didn't find anything that's more recent than that. Majority owner of Employer Direct and has a stake in Carvana as well. So he's kind of got his hands in a few different things, and he's probably doing pretty well as well. Chicago, you got Rocky Wirtz. He's worth $4.4 billion as of 2019. And of course, it's an inherited family business, which started as far back as 1945. So this goes way back, the Wirtz family, very good. And liquor is the business. So I'm going to go ahead and say liquor sales for 2020 have been strong. I don't have the numbers. I don't need them. Liquor sales have likely been very strong in 2020, even with bars closed. Probably because bars closed, you got to order it online. According to Skip the Dishes, some of the highest rated businesses locally are liquor stores or lifesavers. Now, Anne Cranky is listed as the owner of the Colorado Avalanche, and she's listed as being worth $8.7 billion as of this year. Now, husband Stan is worth $10 billion, and Josh, their son, is listed as an owner as well. The reality is, Stan's the owner, but because he's an NFL owner, you're not allowed to own franchises in other locations when you own an NFL franchise. So Ann is listed as the owner of the Colorado Avalanche. It's just an end around, and it basically stands the owner. So yeah, and they're, whether together they're 18.7 billion. I'm guessing it's more like 10 billion combined. There's a 1.3 billion Stan's worth that Ann doesn't get credit for, something along those lines. But they're not going to be hurting right now because there's a lot of cash there to play with. John P. McConnell for the Columbus Blue Jackets. The only listing I could find had him worth $118 million. He's Worthington Industries CEO, and he is the son of the founder of the Columbus Blue Jackets. So I don't know if his interests have been hit during 2020 or not, but $118 million is low. That is a low amount for an NHL owner. And Columbus is one of those teams we always talk about, oh, they should move Florida, they should move Arizona, they should move this and that. I see some weakness with Columbus and the overall franchise's long-term viability. I do. I see some weakness there in that, attendance is good. It's usually not a sellout. And there's some idea about certain things. And again, I don't think the NHL is going to move any team over the next, I'll say, 5 years. But I do wonder why Columbus never really gets brought up as potentially being one of those teams that has financial difficulties. Tom Gaglardi is the owner of the Dallas Stars, worth $3.92 billion as of 2018. Northland Property owner and owns hotels and restaurants. Hotels and restaurants have been hit this year. So $3.92 billion means he probably has some money to give. Here's the other interesting thing too. When they're valuing owners, some of it may be the land too. This isn't just they have $3.92 billion in money they roll around in a room in their house or in a floor of their house. This is valuation of their entire holdings of everything. So some of these owners may have taken a hit on the valuations of what they own based on what we've been going through. And I would think especially if you're an owner of a hotel, if you're an owner of a resort, if you're an owner of land, odds are that's probably depreciated a bit this year because people don't have the money to spend on a house. They don't have the money to invest, and investors probably sitting it out a little bit, waiting for things to get better. Detroit, the estate of Mike Ilitch is listed as the owner, so that means, of course, kids and whatnot. $6.1 billion as of 2017 was the worth of Mike Ilitch, so that money passes along to the children. And, of course, also ownership of the Detroit Tigers and founder of Little Caesars Pizza. Little Caesars probably doing pretty well this year as well. So again, the companies that manufacture food and sell fast food, that kind of thing, they're probably doing pretty well this year. Edmonton, Daryl Katz is the owner. He's worth $3.3 billion in 2020. And of course, when there was concerns about whether or not Edmonton would stick around, all that, Daryl Katz is that stability that Edmonton needed in ownership. And he owns the Katz Group, which there's numerous businesses. I wasn't going to put them all up there because, again, this is just a basic outline of who the owners are. Vincent Viola, $2.5 billion net worth this year. And the weird thing with Viola is he's had various business ventures along the way to become worth $2.5 billion, but he was almost named the Secretary of the Army back in 2016 before he pulled out in 2017, in part because in order to take over something like that, the Pentagon said, hey, you've got to divest some of your businesses, and he wasn't able to do it to the satisfaction of others, so he just said, forget it then, I'm gonna go ahead and take myself out of the running. Now the LA Kings list Philip Anschutz and Edward P. Roski as the co-owners. They're worth a combined $15 billion, again, according to what I found online. They're developers, and they've got their hands in real estate investments. Again, real estate this year, probably not the cash cow that it's been in the past. Although the other side you can look at it is that if the market's down and you think it's going to bounce back in 2021, you invest now, you buy now, with the idea that you're going to make more money later. So again, with that kind of money, they can afford to do some speculative buying and probably make a mint next year. Craig Leopold is the owner of the Minnesota Wild, and if that name seems familiar, it's because he was also the owner of the Nashville Predators. At one point, of course, Nashville went through their own problems, so he sold them and eventually became the owner of the Wild, and he was the founder of Mariello. So yeah, Leopold worth a pretty decent amount of money. Now, if you are a Montreal Canadiens fan, I don't need to tell you they're owned by Molson, and that Jeff Molson is the majority owner. The family's worth $1.75 billion, which is a lot in Canada, and runs Molson. So I just put on the board Molson, duh, because we know, we are aware. I can move along. There's no concerns about any kind of finances when it comes to Montreal. Nashville, this is where it got kind of weird. Thomas Sagarin is the name of the owner, or Sagarin. I couldn't find a net worth. I looked for a net worth. Couldn't find a net worth for him. He's the owner of AmSurge Corp, and he bought the team from Craig Leopold in 2007. So he is like the majority owner of, he's not the only one, so this may be why there's no like big, here's his net worth, he's worth this many millions of dollars, but he's kind of the majority owner, and he's listed as the owner at the NHL level. But it is a corporate kind of setup. So and again, Nashville, not that long ago, at least it doesn't feel like it was that long ago, that there was, they're gonna move, and then everything was fine. New Jersey, Joshua Harris is listed as the owner. He's worth $4.9 billion, as of numbers that were released this year. Co-founder of Apollo Global Management. So, again, global management, says it all right there, right? Manages the globe. I don't think he actually manages the globe. But anyway, $4.9 billion, he's pretty well off. The Islanders are owned by John Ledecky and Scott Malkin. No relation to Evgeny. And I wonder how many times he says, look, we're not related. We're not. We're just both in hockey. We're not related. Ledecky's worth $340 million. Malkin's worth $200 million, and they're businessmen. So they took over the Islanders, and again, it's a thank God these guys came along kind of situation for the New York Islanders, right? This was a team that struggled with ownership that was colorful, ownership that decades back was a fraud, and Wong, as solid of an owner as Charles Wong was, Ledecky and Malkin, there's some stability there with them. So James L. Dolan is the owner for the New York Rangers, worth a reported $2 billion. Again, that's the most recent assessment I could find, and owns MSG Entertainment. So they're in pretty good shape. Eugene Melnick, of course, is the owner for the Ottawa Senators. $1.2 billion is his net worth as of this year. And he's the founder of BioVale. And so with Melnick, there's been discussing of his finances and how much he may actually be worth. And that's the whole thing with owners and with people of wealth. Because they'll tell you, I'm worth $2.5 billion. And you may look at the bank account of, say, Jeff Molson might say, I'm worth $1.75 billion, the whole family. You look at his bank account, you go, Jeff, you're overdrawn. How does this work? Yeah. So there's numerous valuations that go into all these. Philadelphia. Brian L. Roberts is listed as the owner. He's worth $1.7 billion. He's the CEO of Comcast. You may have heard of Comcast. The Pittsburgh Penguins, Mario Lemieux is the more famous of the two owners, but Ronald Burkle is the one with the real money, $1.5 billion. Mario, not too bad, at $200 million, right? Founder of UCAPA Companies, which is the Ronald Burkle claim to fame here. And, of course, famously, Mario Lemieux has saved this franchise twice. Saved it on the ice and financially when they drafted him, and he became the most electrifying player, arguably, in history. Right up there with Gretzky. Can have that argument some other time. And then he saved it again as an owner after that. So, kudos to Mario for that. And then on the San Jose front, Hasso Plattner. If you're like, who's Hasso Plattner? Exactly. This is why everybody hates Gary Bettman. And they don't hate the owners that are on this board, because Bettman works for these guys. Plattner's worth $17.9 billion. That's just silly money. That's like, I burned $1 billion today because I felt like it. Don't worry. I invested in some stocks, made another $1 billion. I might burn some more money tomorrow. Kind of money will drive you crazy. He's the founder of SAP, which is one of the most financially well-off software companies, the third most traded company globally. So that just tells you all you need to know. Made of money. And software, I would think in 2020, has done pretty well. Tom Stillman for St. Louis, couldn't find any idea of what he makes, what he's worth. Couldn't find it. Wasn't there. He owns SLB Acquisition Holdings, which owns the Enterprise Center and the Stifel Center. Or Stifel Theater, I should say. Sorry about that. So owns Enterprise Center, so that's a good cash generator most years. I'm going to, again, go out on a limb and say in 2020, owning an arena or a stadium, not as money, not as much of a cash cow as it would be most seasons, most years, right? So, yeah, I couldn't find the valuation on Tom Stillman. Apologize to Blues fans right now for that. Jeffrey Vinnick is listed as the owner of the Tampa Bay Lightning, worth $600 million. He did run hedge funds. Hedge funds made some people some money. He got out of it in 2013. I could explain hedge funds. Just take numbers, grind them up in a grinder, make some side bets with your friends, take all the money out of the grinder, throw it in the air. There's hedge funds. So I've watched shows on hedge funds and all the stuff that led up to the financial collapse about a decade ago, and I've tried to understand it. I really have, but that's intentional. The whole way the finances work is intentional. It's so that the rest of us don't understand what's going on, because then we can't say that they did what? We just kind of our eyes glass over and we go, I don't understand. So yeah, he ran that. Smart guy. He was able to run it, and he's the owner now of the Lightning. Larry Tanenbaum, of course, the listed owner of the Toronto Maple Leafs, MLSE chairman, Maple Leaf Sports Entertainment, 25% stake in that company. He's worth $1.5 billion. $1.5 billion for Tanenbaum. Not a guy who's hurting, but again, MLSE Entertainment, you've got to think they've taken a bit of a hit. The Toronto Maple Leafs make a ton of money. Toronto can generate cash, but this year has to be a down year for them, right? Francesco Aquilini of the Vancouver Canucks, his family's reportedly worth $3.3 billion. So I'm not sure how much of that is Francesco, how much of that might go somewhere else, but it's listed his family's worth $3.3 billion. And he is in charge of Aquilini Developments, real estate. So again, this comes down to, for people who have money in real estate, this has probably been a tough year. And so I don't know how much this is going to affect the bottom line. I don't know where else he might have money invested, what else he might do. But this is still a pretty good starting point. We have $3.3 billion. I will take $3.3 billion with a bit of a loss in the real estate market. I'll do that. Vegas, of course, owned by Bill Foley. $837 million is reportedly his worth. I thought that was oddly specific. I was kind of disappointed it said $837 million and not something like he's reportedly worth $837,596,321.57. Maybe round up to the nearest dollar. I thought that would have been more fun. But of course, he almost owned the Jacksonville Jaguars in the NFL, and then that fell through. So if he'd owned the Jaguars, would we have a team in Vegas? There's the question, right? I'm going to say probably. But Bill Foley, very outspoken owner, very willing to share. I'm going to go ahead and go out on a limb and say there's other owners that kind of wish maybe he wouldn't share some of the stuff he does. Here's what we're doing. Don't tell people what we're doing. But Foley is out there, and yet, comparatively speaking, he doesn't have the money that a lot of the other owners do. But he's still very well off, and because Vegas is such an important market to the NHL now, that gives him a lot of sway and a lot of impact on decisions. Ted Leonsis for the Capitals is worth $1.1 billion, founder of Monumental Sports and Entertainment. So he runs the team store too then, because isn't it like Monumental? Anyways, because I was going through the team store looking for stuff and sold out on the reverse. But anyways, Leonsis, who famously has been willing to spend some money as need be to put a good team on the ice, and to maybe lose a little bit of money along the way if it means winning a Stanley Cup. So Leonsis has been a pretty chill owner altogether. Mark Chipman and David Thompson, a little bit of a difference between their net worth. Mark Chipman, $500 million. Kudos to you for being worth $500 million. David Thompson, $39 billion. More than I think everybody else put together. I've seen posts lately from some on this channel. Long-term, Winnipeg's in trouble. Long-term, the Winnipeg Jets they're not going to make it. Long-term, the Winnipeg Jets financially is just not feasible. If there's a guy who owns this team with $39 billion that says, I want this team to stay in Winnipeg, it's not going anywhere. So unless he at some point says, that little tax write-off of mine, those Winnipeg Jets, I'm kind of tired of having them around. Okay, but until then, I don't think there's anything to worry about. He owns Reuters, Bell, and the Globe and Mail. So I'm going to go ahead and say Bell makes him a lot of money. I'm going to go ahead and say Globe and Mail, though, I mean, newspapers aren't what they used to be. I'm gonna guess that generates some money. And Reuters, you guys know Reuters, right? $39 billion. So you can basically buy almost every other owner on the board. I'm going to say other than maybe Hasso Plattner. He's got more money than almost everybody else combined. So yeah, as long as you got money like that behind you, your team's probably pretty stable. I agree, Winnipeg's got a small arena, but it's fine. It's fine. They'll just charge more money for tickets, and Jets fans will pay it. So now you know why I'm wearing a Jets jersey, because $39 billion, kudos. And then, of course, I thought I'd mention Seattle because they're coming in, right? $650 million have almost, I think it's almost been completely paid. I know they haven't paid the whole thing. I know that. I know they have a final payment to make. I'm not sure what that number is. I don't know that they've shared that information. But Jeremy Bonderman's worth $3.7 billion. And, of course, Jerry Bruckheimer, you know him from Hollywood, he's worth $1 billion. So combined, they're worth $4.7 billion. This is why the NHL was perfectly fine with expansion, because you're bringing in more billionaires, bringing in more people with a lot of money, and the NHL really likes money. So there you go. The ownership of all 32 teams, and here's the question. If there's six owners that are saying, well, I'd rather just not play rather than play, who would the six be? Because there's been rumors that 6 to 8 that are saying, well, if we can't have fans in attendance, we might as well not have a season. Which owners on this board would be the ones that would be saying that? Would it be the ones that are losing money because they have other businesses that are already losing money? They don't want to have another one that's losing money on top of it? Or could it be the ones that are already making a ton of money and they're going, well, I'm making a ton of money here. Why would I want to lose money over there? Because that happens. Where the more money you might have, you might say, well, I like seeing my account go up. I like seeing my worth go up. Why would I want it to drop? So we'll see. But there you go. There's the people that are the employers of Gary Bettman and the owners who mostly you may not see much of outside of, say, their home market. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. Which owners you may like, which ones you may not, that kind of thing. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And hey, thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I'll talk to you again soon.